AI acts as an assistant in those workflows, making you 50% faster, 80% faster, even 90% faster, but still leaving you in the driver's seat. It might mean spending tens of hours a week just finding the right candidates for a role. And then doing that process all over again, the AI will surface new profiles, including a text description of why that profile was surfaced for the search.
Welcome to Future Work, the podcast about a happier future of work and the role of people and technology within that. In today's episode, we're joined by David Paffenholz, the founder of PeopleGPT, an AI platform that uses a ChatGPT-style interface to help source the right candidate for open roles. We'll discuss how AI is transforming recruitment, making it more efficient, altering the role of human recruiters, and whether those are still necessary. So let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Deel. Looking to hire employees globally? Choose Deel, the global-first HR and payroll platform operating in over 100 countries. Simplify hiring, payroll, and compliance, all on one single platform. Deel's in-house legal experts ensure continuous compliance and unmatched data security, making international employment effortless. Customers praise the platform for its intuitive design and robust support, earning over 3,000 positive reviews. If you're ready to expand your team worldwide with ease, visit flexos.work/deal to book a demo today. flexos.work/DEEL to book a demo today. Thanks so much to the wonderful team at Deel for making FlexOS's mission of a happier future of work possible. And now, onto the podcast.
David, thanks so much for being on. It's a great pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So at the beginning of this year, we did a report on the top 40 AI in HR platforms. And a couple of things really jumped out. Number one is that recruiting was overrepresented within the report, a lot of recruiting AI software. So clearly there must be something in recruiting that's very tedious and repetitive that AI can do better. And then number two, the other thing that was jumped out is that you have a really interesting company name, Juicebox, and a really interesting product name called PeopleGPT. Yeah, so very curious to hear about what it is and how it will help recruiting.
Yeah, thanks so much. PeopleGPT is an AI-powered people search engine. That means we help you find the right talent for any role across over 30 different data sources using large language models to do so. It's really exciting because it's the first time that you can search through profiles at scale based on an actual understanding of what someone does, rather than just applying labels or filters on job titles, experiences, or more. And so our hope is to change the way that companies find talent and find the right talent for their roles.
So if AI does all of that, then what does that mean for the human recruiter? What are they left to do?
Yeah, I like that question because it's a really interesting one, especially both in recruiting but also in other industries. I think there's like two different approaches companies can take to building AI software, and then that like really influences how it's used as well. And so there's the kind of one approach towards full automation, like building full platforms from scratch that take an entire workflow and automate it. And that has existed before AI. AI has unlocked a lot of technology to scale that up. And there's a lot of companies building in that space. There's the second approach, which is building human-led AI-assisted software. We fall into that second approach. And so that means humans are the decision makers. They decide what search to write, what job description to use for a search, what direction to take it in, which profiles are the right fit, which profiles do we want to shortlist and reach out to. And the AI acts as an assistant in those workflows, making you 50% faster, 80% faster, even 90% faster, but still leaving you in the driver's seat.
Okay, and so this is where the famous human in the loop concept comes in. So it's not doing everything just by itself. There's still a human controlling and deciding what to do, because not everyone is a recruiting expert. I definitely am not. What a typical recruiting workflow would look like, and then what does it look like when AI, for example, your platform takes over part of that. So just imagine that we all have no idea how recruiting works, which I'm sure is true for most of us.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll focus in on kind of the area of recruiting that we work with the most, which is any type of outbound recruiting. And so any role where we feel like we haven't gotten the best inbound applicant pool, or we're looking for something really specific where we have to go out and find the right candidate. And so that's where we work with outbound recruiters who focus on identifying that talent. Oftentimes that's from LinkedIn, other times it's from other sources such as specific technical areas, and bringing them into the role. The specific workflow is as follows. It usually starts off with an intake or kickoff call with the hiring manager. The hiring manager describes the needs for the role and discusses with the recruiter whether that's something that's possible, whether the right candidates can be found for that, and what the perfect candidate would look like for them. After that, there's kind of a phase of iteration where the recruiter starts identifying profiles. In some cases, there's a sourcer involved whose specific job is to help identify those profiles and then review them with the hiring manager whether they're going in the right direction. After that, we have the outreach step where we get in touch with those candidates, see who's interested in the role, and then in the third step, decide whether we proceed to an interview process. By nature, it's an iterative cycle. So you might go through that cycle multiple times, depending on how many changes need to be made and whether the search is going in the right direction, or if there's even the type of talent available that the hiring manager has in mind. And that last piece is actually a really interesting one because that can often change the entire journey, even when you're quite far into it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's very interesting, this distinction between inbound and outbound. So typically, if I was to hire someone, I would post a job and assume that people come to me because they want to work here and the role sounds interesting and like all the benefits are good. But you're saying that like there are definitely cases where that doesn't happen and therefore someone gets tasked with, okay, you got to find me this person. Maybe it's someone who doesn't want to leave their job yet or is not actively seeking. And they're normally search on LinkedIn and search on different platforms to try and find that very specific person. But you're saying that all that work, which is clearly digital and clearly automatable, an AI can do. Is that kind of how it works?
That's exactly it. So what we do is we try to provide you the tooling to search through profiles at large scale and search through different types of data sources. And so the primary platform that everyone uses is LinkedIn. It has really powerful search filters to go out and find talent, and you can configure pretty extensive searches depending on what your requirements are. That being said, at the end, it is still a search platform. That means you, the user, is going to be reviewing every profile that you're looking for until you find the right fit. And as you can imagine, that's an extremely time-intensive process. And so might mean spending like tens of hours a week just finding the right candidates for a role and then doing that process all over again, depending on how many we need. And so that is exactly the process that we want to focus on helping with and help automate to get you to those right candidates as fast as possible.
And it's hidden in the name, but the way that the platform works, as I saw it on the site, is that it almost looks like you're talking to a ChatGPT, but it's like asking all kinds of questions. You're actually talking about like what kind of candidate are you trying to find? So what's the technology behind it? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, great question. So the large language model is the technology behind ChatGPT and also a lot of the other AI innovation that we've been seeing lets us make decisions, which is something that wasn't really possible before. We could create ML models that might be really good at one specific task, like labeling something or extracting one piece of information, but we never really had a generalized decision-making engine. And so we use that technology to help make decisions on whether a profile matches what you're looking for and do that at tens of thousands of profiles per second. And so in terms of the workflow, it starts off with a prompt. You can describe who you're searching for, say, for example, software engineers in New York with experience in HR tech and maybe skilled in machine learning. And so that's the starting point for search. Usually there's quickly some additional realizations where we realize, hey, we actually want someone with 8 years of experience, or we also want someone who is bilingual, as an example. And we can use that to further refine the search. And so that's where the AI will take your updated configurations into account. It can be hard requirements or soft requirements, and then help surface new profiles based on that, including a text description of why that profile was surfaced for the search.
Oh, interesting. So it will also explain why it thought this would be a good candidate for the role. So again, like it sounds a lot like what a human recruiter would do, where they're kind of using their experience and their knowledge, and then they use certain tools to, bring up a list of potential candidates, and then even explaining like, oh, I think this one would fit because of this. And so is there any reason why a LinkedIn wouldn't just build this in natively? Like why this needs to be an outside platform?
It's a great question. It's something we've thought about a bunch as well. And so First off, LinkedIn is working on AI products. And so they have built, I think they've even announced kind of a co-pilot style product where they'll help configure a search. The way LinkedIn is approaching it, which is interesting too, is more of a kind of helping you filter and helping you build what a filter configuration looks like. What we're focused on more, and this is really more on the pure AI side, is helping you or helping the AI make decisions about profiles and whether they could be a good fit. And so not only do we help set up the filters, but we go one step further. We say, hey, this profile seems like a strong fit for this role because of X, Y, and Z. For us, it's easy to do that in the sense that our incentives are aligned with you. We want to help you surface the best, help surface the best candidates to you. With LinkedIn, there's perhaps some additional factors at play where they're running what's more of a marketplace or a combination of social network and recruiting platform. And so I think that often results in some different business decisions around what a product looks like or what the use case is that they're trying to serve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to say there must be something around the incentives of the business that they're running and then the business that you're running. You're really here to help the recruiter for now. But does that mean that eventually, if we just extrapolate from here a couple of steps further, is there still even a need for a recruiter, or could any hiring manager just go into the tool and say, I'm looking for this and this? And then particularly one element within that, which is that what I think a good recruiter would probably do would be to say, look, that's who you think you want to hire, but actually from my experience, you probably don't need this, or you may be forgetting this, or like you said, the years of experience or the background or any of those kind of things, right? So could this eventually replace recruiters altogether?
I love the way you frame that question in particular, because I think it already partially brings up what I'm about to say too, is the experience and the ability to help alter that search. And so oftentimes the searches that we see are unsuccessful, or that we use as unsuccessful test cases on the platform, are where there's some misalignment or misunderstanding of what the right candidate looks like. And that's where in that initial search setup piece, that intake meeting, that intake call with the hiring manager is so crucial and really hard to replicate from like a pure AI perspective. And so being able to understand, push back, change the search, I think will continue to be crucial. And then second, also help direct the search. There's a lot of decision points. There's a lot of different types of candidates that one can find, where really having an understanding of what a specific company's culture looks like, what the types of profiles and backgrounds are that one hires, whether there's specific weighting that one places on specific skills and backgrounds that we know will help them succeed at that company. That company-specific knowledge is what the recruiter brings to the table that the AI will really struggle to replicate. And so the AI is a powerful assistant, but it's just that, it's only an assistant.
Totally get that. But at the same time, you could also envision that AI only has to get 10% better for it to also be able to absorb company culture requirements and to understand, what good candidates look like, right? I was interviewing Barb Hyman from Sapia, and they have so much data because they can track not only like who applied for a job and like who interviewed for a job, but all the way down through who stayed in the job the longest and who was the best person at the end of the day for that role. And they can then calculate that back to when they do the next interview. So the moment that you layer in all that kind of data, behavioral data, on the job data, probably you get to a very similar input that normally a human recruiter in a company would have, right? So is there like at a certain like longer timeline a view that you don't really need that recruiter anymore?
Interesting question. I think for the intake process in certain scenarios, I can see that being the case, especially if it's kind of like what you described, where there's already some historic data of, we've hired for this role for the past 15 years. We have had 100 other people who have been in this role, and we know what excellence looks like and what we're looking for and what makes a strong candidate. In those cases, yes, I can see that happen. The pieces where it's perhaps even more interesting and where the outbound recruiting piece becomes even more important too is where there's a limited talent pool. It's a niche skill set that you're looking for. You're trying to be creative in how you go about that, convince the right candidate to join, selling to the candidate and bringing them into that process. And I think that's where I struggle to see AI taking on that human bit. And where even if AI becomes 3 steps better, then it's a human interaction. And unless something really drastically changes, I think the thing that gets humans most excited, or that gets them to buy into something, is hearing from them, hearing their story and understanding why they want to join and being able to act on that. And so I think, at least right now, I struggle to see how that piece will become AI led.
Totally. Yeah, I can completely see that, where the moment that you have to reach out to someone and actually make the pitch, and especially if it's this fringe scenario where it's not just like, oh, you're doing this at this company, come do it at our company, but you're making some pitch around reinvent yourself, do this new thing, or have you thought about going this direction? Then definitely you want that to be a very human interaction. But it's kind of like all the steps leading to that your platform or AI generally can do. So again, it goes to the core promise of AI will take out all the work that is repetitive and that is easily automatable, so that we can focus on the human part. We can connect directly with maybe the couple of right candidates.
That's exactly it. And that's kind of how I think about even in my everyday workflow is like, these are the pieces that I enjoy the least are the pieces that are repetitive. And the pieces that I kind of know what I'll have to be doing, even if it takes a lot of time, I want to be able to get rid of those and have a smart assistant help do those for me.
Because you have to sell this into recruiters, I assume, right?
That's right.
What is it like to go to them and say, AI can automate this part of your role, AI can do this part of what you're currently doing? How receptive are people? What are kind of like common barriers that you hear when you're trying to sell in this platform? Because it's so early days, right? It's so early for these kind of applications to be used. I'm sure there's a lot of barriers and hesitations from people to even, trust it and to make it part of their new workflow and all that. So like, what are you hearing from the market when you're selling this?
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially because we sell into kind of two different types of groups of customers, one of them being in-house recruiting teams, the other being recruiting agencies. And we're actually pretty evenly split between the two. And the reactions and kind of selling points are quite different. So on the agency side, what we see pretty directly is typically be it the recruiter or decision maker that we're speaking to, instantly see the potential for helping them close their roles faster. And it becomes a direct revenue generating platform in the sense that they're able to close a role faster and take on more roles as well. And so the potential from that becomes pretty quickly recognized. And that usually makes it a pretty fast sales process for us too. There's often some kind of hesitance in terms of like, how does this work? How will it work with my workflow? We really push for trials in that case, just to see the platform in action. And then on the in-house recruiting side, it's a little bit more nuanced, and it actually can vary quite much from company to company. For larger recruiting teams, it's especially on the efficiency side, recruiting is cyclical by nature. And so there's always those periods where the requirements on the recruiting side exceed the capacity of the team, and it becomes extremely stressful. And so tools that drive efficiency without having to drastically expand headcount can provide a lot of value in those times in particular. And that's where we see the strongest adoption from in-house teams. They can increase their capacity without having to increase their headcount as much, and can do so quite flexibly as well. It's a software platform you can sign in any time rather than having to go out and hire to expand the team in those cases.
Especially when you're pushing for trials, people will pretty quickly see whether it works for them or not, like whether there's a benefit or not, right? It's like comparing it again to the original ChatGPT. Like the moment you try that, you kind of know, okay, this is going to be helpful for me, especially if you're kind of coached to use it in the right way. I mean, I know you're in your role, but are there any downsides generally to using AI within recruiting in this way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a couple downsides that end up being a part of that workflow. And so particular, if one gets used to having the AI set up the initial pieces of the search and it becomes a repetitive workflow, it perhaps disincentivizes some of the creativity that can come with sourcing as well, and trying out different strategies, new ways of finding talent. It's something we think about quite actively and try to think of different ways to create a search as well to really kind of emphasize that piece. And then the second aspect is on the in terms of how the product is used in combination with other platforms. And so, for example, one thing that we focus on is bringing in really niche data sources. And so, for example, we want to bring in developers who participate in a specific community, or advertisers who win specific advertising awards to show that data and make it surfaceable. The downside is that oftentimes, because this data is new and fresh, it becomes kind of an overemphasis, when in many times still the regular sourcing mechanisms, or just letting the AI go through its regular process, can also be the most efficient piece. And so I think it's partially on us in terms of how we set up the product, but then also in terms of understanding how our customers and users want to use the platform.
Yeah, okay, I totally see that. Yeah, it's such a new thing, right? I think like even I'm just like I'm asking the questions, like trying to wrap my head around how does this become a new standard or a new way of working? It's so new in so many ways. So both the pros and the cons probably in certain ways like still have to be seen, right? We don't really know. The models are unpredictable. The outputs may be unpredictable. We don't really know how it's going to work in the longer term. But there seems to be something there that seems very intuitive, which is that if you're currently going to a search box in a couple of different sites where you can find talent and you're doing all these like little things and then you're creating a long list and then you have to sort through that long list to create a short, it seems obvious now that AI could play a big role there.
Exactly. And I think the potential of AI anywhere where there's a lot of data available, and be it structured or unstructured data, that's where AI can often have an outsized impact. And recruiting is a great example of that. There's huge amounts of talent data out there. A lot of it is unused. Some of it is structured. A lot of it is unstructured. And large language models provide us with the first real opportunity to use that data effectively.
Yeah, really, really super interesting. And then the interface must play a big role in that as well, right? Because 2 years ago, no one would have found this to be a very intuitive way of working, of just like an open chat box and just start talking. But now it's obviously something that we're training ourselves on to default to the ChatGPT interface and just start asking questions. Then alongside, there's also like certain toggles. So it is guiding you in some way, right? In your platform, it is guiding you in some way. What are some optimizations that you're making over time as you're going from your initial idea to seeing people use the product, getting some of that user feedback, some of that user data, maybe some screen recording, Hotjar? How are you optimizing the product based on what you see people use it?
For sure. We've gone through quite a journey there. So we actually started off with a pure chat interface. So kind of similar to what you'd see if you open up ChatGPT. We pretty quickly learned, and I think this is actually very generally applicable, is that a pure chat interface is almost never the right interface for a specific product. And the reason for that is there's a lot of information that's better displayed in a visual format, or even interactions like toggles, switches, filters that can be shown in much better ways than pure chat. No one wants to type out, change the years of experience to be more than 8 years of experience if they can just go click a button that does the same thing.
Yeah.
The crucial bit is understanding which parts are best to be left text-driven. In our case, that's starting off a search, describing who you're looking for, where there's a lot of kind of broad and nuance to each word that you choose. While other pieces, such as editing it or reviewing profiles within it, can be much more visually driven. And so we started with a chat interface. We now have a hybrid of chat plus more custom interfaces where we show profiles, where we show experiences, where we describe those experiences. And I think that's actually a trend we've seen across the industry, from everything ranging from even like slide generation tools. Even ChatGPT itself has started including different elements within their UI. And so if you ask for code, you'll see a code editor and more. And I think that's a trend we'll continue to see because the workflows just become more impactful if you have something dedicated for that.
Yeah, makes total sense. I think we saw that, for example, in image generation. You can go to Midjourney on Discord and prompt it a bunch of stuff and get some really nice images. Or then you see something like Leonardo AI, where it's a little bit more like that. You start with a certain prompt, but then you really have all the toggles. Because again, I don't want to type out, change it from 4:3 to 16:9, right? I just want to quickly hit that toggle. So that makes a lot of sense. So this is also something where, again, it's not only your product that's being optimized or being improved, it's also people's understanding of these kinds of tools. And as things are happening in parallel in other platforms, you can learn from that as well. So must be exciting, but also, I would assume pretty daunting to keep track of everything in this field and what's technically possible and what's the right interface and the right service while you're building a new startup anyway. I guess like one question before we end that I think is top of mind for everyone. Especially if I'm talking to other like CHROs and CPOs, there is, whenever we talk about AI, there is a lot of questions and concerns about the ethical side and about bias. Is there anything that you're doing in particular to ensure that there is no bias in, for example, the candidates that the AI brings up when people are searching for, the right fit?
Yep. Really good question, and something really important to, especially the recruiting industry, where it can have like a real world impact. Two things that we do, and we continue to reevaluate this as well. So the first piece is in training our AI models, we remove all personally identifiable information in terms of names, protected information like gender, even nationality from the training data sets and the output data sets that we use. And so if you go into the platform, you're of course still able to see the name of the candidate, but you'll know that the AI, both when generating the output and when understanding the data that why they were matched, did not consider that information in that process. That's really important for especially by avoiding like systematic bias in the AI. And it goes hand in hand with our second approach where we're working with a third party, Wolfia, who provides us with trust and safety services, especially on the AI side. And so they're actually really focused on that. And we've had a good experience working with them on
Yeah, that seems really important. And then obviously there's also an opportunity on the bias side in terms of, if I was just filtering through a list of candidates, I may just in scanning that already exclude some people, maybe to the detriment of both them and also for me, maybe I would have found a better candidate if it was all blanked out. So there's also some opportunity to use the AI to be less biased, right, I would say. And then, on the ethical side, how do you just ensure, maybe with your partner, that AI is used for good, right? And that, again, it could replace part of recruiters' job, maybe recruiters eventually. Like, how do you make sure that this is, at the end of the day, still like a net positive for companies using it?
It is very much to the core of what we do. It's actually like a part of our mission statement is where we provide software that's recruiter-led and AI-assisted. And I think that will continue to be the case. I do think that the role of the recruiter is going to evolve. It's going to become more strategic. It's going to become more managerial. It's going to become more candidate-facing. And I think those are largely good things. And that's also the feedback that I hear when speaking with our users and with our customers. And we believe as well when developing the platform and we continue to build it, I think the most important piece is being close with our customers, understanding what they're looking for and what they need. And that also helps ensure that we continue to be on the right way in the most direct way possible.
Yeah, really interesting. So you're really an ally to recruiters, which I think is great for that community. Are you basically going to go deeper on that side and just become better and better for those recruiters and help them to, again, spend more time with candidates, spend more time on what makes us good as humans? Or do you also have other plans like getting more into the skills management side or more into like the full employee life cycle? Like how do you kind of see the product and the company evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, we're purely focused on recruiting and we plan on staying that way too. There's so much depth to recruiting, both in terms of different types of roles, different types of methods of getting in touch with candidates, reviewing inbound talent and more. Incredible depth to the area. And we think there's a lot of untapped potential that we want to be the AI partner for and really continue to get to know our users and customers even better that way too.
Amazing. Okay, so clear focus. That's really good to hear. And then the final question, same for everyone. Any wish that you have for the future of work besides using AI for recruiting?
I personally wish that we continue to have, and this is a little bit off topic in terms of AI, and maybe that's why I'm mentioning it too. I'll tell a short story. I met my co-founder for the first time in person 1 week before we started the company, right when we were going through YC in San Francisco. That was because of COVID. We had known each other for over 2 years at that point, fully virtually. There's now a push going away from virtual again. We're an in-person company too, but I think that's something really special. And I hope that's something that continues, is that we continue having a global future of work. We continue being open to new opportunities that way. And whether that means we actually work in person together or we work remotely or whatever form it takes, I think there's a lot of value that came from the entire openness to virtual wave and that continues in the future too.
Definitely. No going back to the office 5 or 6 days per week. That sounds like a future that we could all embrace and enjoy. Thanks so much for being on. It was very enlightening and obviously wish you the very best for your company and also for you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today as we heard about a novel AI approach to recruiting from PeopleGPT founder David Paffenholz. Here are a few key takeaways from the conversation. Number 1, efficiency through AI. We learned how AI platforms like PeopleGPT could reduce the time recruiters spend on sourcing candidates by up to 90% by taking over the repetitive and predictable tasks of sorting through candidates, leaving recruiters more time for what humans are actually good at. Number 2, the human in the loop. The conversation underscored how humans still play a role in nuanced decisions and strategic direction, at least for now. Very often, the real value is in better understanding the true needs before a search even starts, informed by company culture and organizational understanding. And number 3, ethical considerations. We also touched on the ethical implications of using AI in recruitment, ensuring that as we integrate these technologies, they enhance rather than compromise our human values and workplace culture. Practices that David put into place include removing all personally identifiable information, including names, gender, and nationality. Join me again next week when I have my very first return guest in Alexandra Samuels, the Wall Street Journal and Fastco journalist and author of Remote Inc., for a follow-up discussion about how AI is disrupting how we work now and in the future. If you like this episode, please hit subscribe and give this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps a ton to boost our mission of a happier future of work. To be the first one to get updates on new episodes, subscribe at flexos.work/futurework.